kill. Foxman kill. Round F5 right in.
This is not an advanced combat base thousands of miles from home. This is Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada. And the battle you just witnessed wasn't real. But the lessons learned in that battle will not soon be forgotten by the young pilots who went through it. Because this is air combat training, as realistic as human ingenuity and advanced technology can make it. This is Red Flag.
The real name of this whole game is the most realistic combat training possible. We often refer to it as the scrimmage before the game. But what the real bottom line is, it's the best possible training we have any place in the world and get the closest we can to combat situation.
Colonel William Luke is the commanding officer of the 4440th Tactical Fighter Training Group, the home of Red Flag. Here, every day, more than 100 of the world's most advanced aircraft launch skyward to tangle in a high-speed air battle.
A good percent of our missions are flown with live bombs. It's not unusual for 60 aircraft to be across targets in very close proximity in less than 10 minutes.
Colonel Doug Melson, second in command at Red Flag, remembers coming here as a new player.
The first several Red Flag sorties that I flew, I was flying in the F-15 here TDY from Europe, and it had been many years since I'd been involved in a true combat situation, but I couldn't help but walk away from those initial sorties saying, I've been here before, and this is really as close to combat as I think I want to get without actually being in it.
Since the earliest biplane battles, the technology and techniques of aerial combat have changed dramatically. But one fact has remained surprisingly constant. In every era, the pilot who survives his first few combat missions is very likely to survive the rest.
In the early stages, they're wrapped up in the conduct of the mission, just as they have been in the past in their home units. Just getting from point A to point B and getting their bomb on target on time, they're pretty much maxed out with that. And the throwing in or the addition of ground and air-to-air threats, generally they can't do both because their time efficiency hasn't been developed to the point where they can do both well enough to keep them alive throughout the entire mission.
American pilots have always trained to improve their flying and gunnery skills, but in Vietnam they suffered a rude awakening. Despite their advanced training and equipment, they achieved a far lower kill ratio than in previous wars. Colonel Jim Evans is the deputy commander for adversary tactics at Red Flag.
Air Force did a study that took us all the way back to World War I, and we kind of used the kill ratio as a measure of merit. So in World War I, the American pilots had an air-to-air kill ratio of 2.5 to 1. That's 2.5 enemy knockdown for each one of us that were lost. In World War II, 3 to 1. In Korea, 10 to 1. And in Vietnam, 2 to 1. And at the middle of that war, that conflict, it was probably closer to 1 to 1. And as Vietnam...
What went wrong in Vietnam?
They employed their aircraft. They didn't have many of them, and so they husbanded them very smartly, and they employed them very smart. They very seldom would allow themselves to get drawn into a situation where they were at a disadvantage. They just would not engage if they were at a disadvantage. The major threats we faced then was the SA-2 guideline missile and the AAA, the radar-guided guns, and again, mainly because of their density and their ability, very limited numbers of targets that we had. Their targets were clustered very close together, so it was relatively easily defended, and they mounted a tremendous density ratio of guns there.
But post-Vietnam studies also pointed to deficiencies in U.S. pilot training. Colonel Luke.
I went in 1968 to Southeast Asia as a young lieutenant. I'd finished pilot training, went to training in the F-4, and immediately went right to Southeast Asia. When we were training air-to-air, we always fought against each other. And we very seldom talked about anything except the capabilities of how to fight or how to train F-4s against F-4s or that kind of capability.
In the aftermath of Vietnam, the Air Force laid out 3 clear goals for improved combat training. The first goal was to provide realistic combat scenarios, incorporating a full range of hostile threats on thousands of square miles of ranges in the American West. The second goal was to create a simulated hostile fleet of dissimilar aircraft with broad variations in performance, not unlike the mix that pilots might face in wartime. The third goal was to create a special aggressor force of instructor pilots schooled in the doctrine and tactics of the most likely enemy forces. Many of these pilots were only 10 years old when Americans last experienced large-scale air combat, and their potential enemies have more and better aircraft than ever before, increasingly sophisticated air defenses, and improved tactical doctrine. Red Flag is designed to improve the chances for these pilots in the event they have to go to war.
And almost use an analogy of a football game in that most all football coaches take their second team and run the adversary's plays against their first team. We do the same.
The playing field for Red Flag spreads over more than 12,000 square miles of southwestern desert, but the real action is concentrated in an area roughly half the size of the state of New Jersey. Lieutenant Colonel Martin Bonin is one of the people in charge of the range.
The 1,400 targets out there, we have simulated a typical battle scene with a forward edge of the battle area. We have a simulated tank column breaking through. Behind that, we've got resupply columns. And in the very rear area of our bombing range, we have simulated strategic targets, airfields, resupply depots, and things like that.
Even more important, there are radars that match the performance and electronic signature of enemy radars, threat simulators that lock onto unwary aircraft, guiding guns that do everything but fire real shells, and simulated surface-to-air missiles that let the pilot know his aircraft has been shot down. Red Flag exercises are conducted 5 times a year at Nellis, as selected units are flown in from their home bases. For this Red Flag exercise, more than 300 aircraft have flown into Nellis. McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagles from Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. General Dynamics F-111s from Laken Heath, England. Dassault Mirages and Dassault BA Jaguars from France and Africa. First Lieutenant John Bratton has come from England, where his F-111 squadron is stationed.
There's a lot of excitement in being told you're coming to Red Flag. It means a lot of hard work to be prepared for it. But boy, once you get here, you really find out it's worth it. A lot of academics, which basically you have to study on your own time. And then the flying training, you get an increased sortie allotment, which you're going to be flying more missions right before you go to Red Flag to get your skills fine-tuned.
Red Flag involves far more than just combat air crews. All the operational personnel, ground crews, and equipment of each unit are also brought to the exercise.
To prepare and come to Red Flag, it involves a lot of time and man hours on a lot of individuals' parts to figure out how many parts we're going to have to bring and how many airplanes, how many pilots, how many maintenance people, how we're going to get them there, how many 141s it's going to take to airlift us here. And they bring the 141s to Holloman and load us all up, load the pallets on, airlift us here. We get off, we unload our pallets and set up shop in a hangar, just like this one. Then the jets come in, we recover them, and get them prepped for the next day's flying, so they can go out and fight.
In addition, all the support aircraft that would be associated with real combat are involved. For example, Boeing KC-135 tankers from Strategic Air Command, Lockheed C-130 and C-131 cargo transports from Trenton Royal Canadian Air Force Base, and Boeing AWACS. From tankers for in-flight refueling to sophisticated electronic warfare aircraft. Nothing is left out. Air crews from Allied air forces are also part of Red Flag, adding valuable experience with Allied doctrine and with other types of aircraft that aren't in the U.S. inventory. Captain Jean-Luc Crochard of the French Tactical Air Force.
We are doing the same job, that's flying aircraft, and we also have the same aim. But what's interesting in meeting those guys is to see the difference of the preparation, the difference of work, and also see the difference in the aircraft.
Taken together, the units brought in for red flag training are known as the Blue Forces, more than 100 aircraft working together for the first time. For the 2 weeks of their red flag exercise, they'll be flying against more than 100 aggressor aircraft, the Red Forces. The sheer numbers of high-performance aircraft simulating warfare in a limited airspace makes flight safety a major concern.
I'm sitting in the Range Operations Center, codenamed Blackjack. In here, we primarily work on flight safety on the ranges. The ranges are divided into many areas, and we try to deconflict all the flights in there, ensure that one flight isn't flying in while another flight is working, for instance. Here's a typical view of the range information system as we see it on a daily basis. As you can see, we have outlined the entire range complex, all the different parts of that complex, as well as some other items. For instance, in the upper right-hand corner, we have an air refueling track displayed. You can see the white borders of Nevada, Utah, and Arizona displayed, as well as California. We have aircraft coded in different colors. For instance, we have our aggressor aircraft coded in red, and our Blue Forces are generally coded in green.
No matter how you look at it, Red Flag is simply the world's most sophisticated and fully equipped training ground for aerial combat. This is the Adversary Tactics Building at Nellis Air Force Base, home of the 64th and 65th Aggressor Squadrons. From the outside, it looks a lot like any other U.S. Air Force building, but the interior decor has a distinctly different style. This is where aggressor trainees, both pilots and ground controllers, are immersed in the culture, history, and military doctrine of their most likely air war opponents. The objective is to create a special force, thoroughly indoctrinated and retrained, who will instinctively react to air combat situations, just as enemy pilots would. The deputy commander of the aggressor forces is Colonel Jim Evans.
What we do, our mission is to emulate Soviet fighter pilots, to train our pilots against Soviet tactics, to make sure they're prepared should they get in any engagement with Soviets or people trained by Soviet pilots. We study the Soviet aircraft and the Soviet equipment, and we send our pilots regularly to our top intelligence agencies to interface one-on-one with the people that are the best experts in the Soviet aircraft and the Soviet equipment. Then we take our pilots and study how Soviets fly that equipment, those airplanes, the tactics that they fly, and the formations that they fly. And Russian tactics are based upon deception, deceiving maneuvers, flanking maneuvers, and decoy. And the object is to get the American pilot to look at a decoy, follow the decoy when the real threat is off to the side, coming in from low or high, or out of the proverbial high out of the sun.
Members of the aggressor squadrons are among the Air Force's most experienced pilots. For admission to aggressor program, regulations require that they have a minimum of 500 hours of fighter time, equal to 3 or 4 years of experience. But aggressor duty is so desirable to skilled instructor pilots that the average level of experience is almost 3 times as high, from 1,200 to 1,500 hours of fighter time. While many of the units that come to train at Red Flag fly more modern F-15s and F-16s, the aggressor squadrons fly the older and smaller F-5, painted to resemble Soviet aircraft. If the intention is to give realistic combat training, why such a disparity in equipment?
The F-5 is very, very close in both size and performance to the MiG-21. In performance, they're almost exact. There are some limitations as far as ordnance, and there's some differences in the radar capabilities. They're both extremely limited radars, internal radars. The range is somewhat less in the MiG-21, but for all intents and purposes, the F-5 is an extremely good MiG-21 simulator. Because of their experience and their skill, even though they're flying a second-generation airplane, compared to F-5 compared to an F-16 or F-15 is really looking at the airframes themselves is no contest. But when you put that experienced pilot in there, he could generally outfly the student or the operational pilot almost any day, any given day. And as I say, the objective of the aggressor program is not to do that. The objective is to go out there and provide that realistic threat so that the operational pilot will learn, expand his capabilities and his experience, and not lose in a fight with a Soviet, if he ever, or a Soviet client state or client trained individual in some future combat somewhere.
The aggressor squadrons in Red Flag have their own specially trained radar intercept officers, like Captain Keith Russell.
The Soviets rely very heavily on ground controllers. The aircraft that they have are obviously not as technologically advanced as we have, and they are very tied to their ground controller. Their ground controllers simulate, or their ground controllers rather, execute all their tactics, perform all their tactics, while their air crews simply fly the vectors that they're given all the way up to the merge until the visual fight. The job that a GCI controller has in the Air Force, and my specific job, is to get airplanes together, specifically very small airplanes, to get together in a visual arena to where they see each other so that they can fight. It is a whole lot easier to keep airplanes apart than it is to get them together, especially smaller airplanes versus big airplanes.
The resident aggressor units are frequently augmented by units from the Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force, flying under the aggressor command. In this particular Red Flag exercise, some F-15 units will be assigned to the Red Forces to give them an additional high-performance capability. But the air threat of the aggressor forces is only half the problem for the Blue Force pilots that have to run the Red Flag gauntlet. Just as in Vietnam, the Red Flag range is heavily seeded with ground-to-air threats, complete with radar signatures that alert a Blue Force pilot to the specific type of threat that has locked onto his aircraft. Each threat requires a different set of reactions, ranging from electronic countermeasures to evasive maneuvers. Blue Force pilots are constantly tested and forced to be alert to threats from all directions. Captain Jim Staples is now chief of the Red Force's Airborne Defense Section, but he used to be a member of a B-52 crew that took part in Red Flag.
We'd be whipping through the hills and dales at 250 feet off the ground at a good 370 knots indicated, and get the bombs on the target without a problem in the world. Depart the range, come home, debrief at Nellis, and find out we were dead, dead, dead. We look at, they show a tape of us with the crosshairs just on us the entire way. And it is very grim and really hits to home when you think you've done a super job and find out you were dead miles before the target.
Coordinating all the elements of Red Flag requires the same level of planning as real warfare. Battle scenarios are developed by the operations staff of Red Flag, headed by Lieutenant Colonel Ken Schweitzer.
The battle management staff and the air tasking order, the fragmentary order as we call it, starts about 3 days prior to execution. We distribute that out to all of the players because some of the players are off station or they don't fly directly off of Nellis Air Force Base.
To get the most from each mission, Red Flag uses an additional unique feature. Each of the key aircraft participating in Red Flag carries an Airborne Instrumentation Subsystem, or AIS. The size of a Sidewinder missile, the AIS transmits a constant stream of data on aircraft position, velocity, acceleration, and altitude. This information is captured by a number of range sensors and is fed to a sophisticated central computer system specially developed for Red Flag. The entire system has been designed and implemented by the Cubic Corporation, and while it is a technical tour de force, it also serves a very important training function. In other exercises, kills may be recorded by observers taking notes, and a pilot can always argue with the referee. But in Red Flag, there is no room for argument. The computer records every move, every simulated missile launch, and accurately assesses the results. Victims are told immediately and are temporarily disabled before returning to battle. And in the extensive debriefing sessions that follow each mission, every move is replayed in excruciating detail.
When you come in from a mission, you only see the mission through your eyes. You see everything how it happened to you, and you don't get the big picture normally. But when you get back here, and you get to look at the screen with, and see how everybody else saw it, and how that F-15 saw it, and how that SAM operator saw it, you really get an understanding of what really happened out there.
And how does it feel to see yourself die, if only on videotape?
You don't feel good, that's for sure, because you're out there flying as low as you can stand it, and in the F model you're flying as fast as you can really stand it. And when you get back, you know, you've been chaffing and flaring your butt off, and you just think you've done the best job possible. In fact, nobody could do it any better than you did. You're totally exhausted from all the jinking and jiving, and then to see yourself on the screen of a SAM.
But no matter what happened today, at Red Flag, unlike in real war, you have a chance to do better tomorrow. Captain John Sutter is an F-15 pilot with the 49th Tactical Fighter Wing based at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. His wingman is Lieutenant John Marshall, known as Tank. For Marshall, this will be his first Red Flag. Sutter has been here before.
For me, shoot, ever since I learned anything about the Air Force, I always heard go and be a fighter pilot and go to Red Flag and learn how to fight in wars and things. So for me, it's always been exciting. I've been to a couple of them now. And as far as the preparation and all, basically you're trying to hone all your skills, get together as an element, and hone good element skills between you and your paired element member, and get excited about coming and doing the whole thing, and that's real easy to do.
As a wingman, my mission primarily is to support him, to make sure that when he's going in to get a kill, that his 6 o'clock is clear so that another aircraft doesn't come in and get him. And again, it's such a target-rich environment out here. Generally speaking, he'll engage and clear me to engage because there's just enough of them. But my primary role is support, and actually it's a very important one out here. Like I say, there's so many aircraft that it's very easy for him to be going for another aircraft and have one come up and get him from behind. My job is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Marshall and Sutter have completed the necessary flight training and study for Red Flag. Like the other pilots arriving for Red Flag training, they look forward to matching wits with the aggressor forces. But before the exercise begins, they learn that they will not be flying against, but as a part of the aggressor forces. In order to provide a better training scenario and give the Red Forces a more formidable array of aircraft, the F-15 wing from Holloman will be flying under the control of the aggressor forces. The sudden change in plans doesn't upset Sutter. In fact, he welcomes it.
Actually, in this Red Flag in particular, being part of the Red Force is an advantage to us. I think it more closely resembles the type of mission I would expect to have to fly, especially in a European type environment. We, instead of escorting strikers across a FIBA or a hostile territory, which is not something I look forward to doing, we're playing more of the defensive type role, operating in lane and area caps, using our radar, which is what we're best at also, detecting the large forces that are coming at us and killing as many of them as we can.
Sutter and Marshall fly one of the world's most advanced high-performance aircraft, the F-15 Eagle.
It's a fun plane to fly. If you like flying, which obviously everybody that's here does, then you couldn't ask for a better airplane to fly. The responsiveness of the aircraft is unbelievable. It's got an excellent turn rate. It's got a great sustained turn rate because of its extremely powerful engine. It's got a thrust to weight of better than 1, which gives it all kinds of acceleration and an extremely good climbing capability. We would prefer to come in high. It gives us an energy advantage, and again, the F-15 performs better up high, but the overall objective to complete the intercept is to use your potential energy, come in from high, and get your Mach up to complete the intercept, although not absolutely necessary.
In aerial combat, speed and maneuverability are of the essence. Captain Henchy.
As I try to turn the airplane, pull back on the stick, and make a sharp corner with the airplane, and change my direction rapidly, or stay in a turning fight, then the harder I turn, the more G's the airplane pulls. The F-15, what's going to happen is you pull a lot of G's, is the blood that is in your head and upper torso is going to go to your feet. And inconveniently enough, the first thing that you lose when your blood starts going to your feet is you can't see anymore, which makes fighting difficult. So take a short breath, hold it, wait 3 seconds, 3-4 seconds, take another short breath. So you really are grunting a lot and turning pretty hard. Hopefully, if you turn right, you get offensive and you can kill the guy with a quick kill. So you have to you can stop doing that. But it gets pretty aggressive.
In the morning, Captain Sutter and Lieutenant Marshall pre-flight their aircraft before the mission.
Pre-flight aircraft, this is the gun. Just
Marshall checks to ensure that the aircraft's weapons are not loaded and performs a visual inspection of the major systems.
Again, the rest of the pre-flight's just checking the airplane itself out, make sure the tires are good, landing gear, just really basics. You're not trying to buy the thing, just check it out, make sure it's pliable.
The heavy schedule of daily missions places a strain on the highly sophisticated weapon systems, just as operations in real war would. So Marshall and his ground crew take special care to ensure that things are right.
Pre-flight in the AM-9 now, this is our heat-seeking missile. Make sure it's got plenty of argon.
The Sidewinder is not armed for actual firing on the range, but it's linked to the airborne instrumentation subsystem. A simulated firing will register on the range monitoring system and compute the likelihood of a kill under those specific conditions. In today's battle, the Blue mission is to attack the advancing Red ground forces with F-111 bombers and F-4s. Sutter and Marshall will be part of a force of 8 Eagles that will rendezvous with tankers for aerial refueling, then fly high air cover for the Red forces, while the remainder of the Red forces flying F-5s provide low-level support against the Blue forces. Sutter and Marshall's mission is to attack the Blue Force aircraft from their high position as they enter and exit the combat zone.
I'm the mission commander for the F-15s today. We're going to go out with 8 F-15s at one time. We're going to pre-strike refuel, so we're all topped off with gas, and then we're going to push all 8 aircraft. We're going to be up high in the contrail level, so the strikers see us coming, and then at about 20 miles we're going to disappear out of the cons.
As the mission begins, the runways at Nellis scream with the closely timed launch of flight after flight of aircraft. Once they're airborne, the aerial dance begins. Split-second timing and extraordinary skill are the order of the day.
Okay, kid, that's it. Just northwest of Belted, that's the kill.
In only an hour, the mission is over. Winners and losers alike return to assess the day, working with detailed computer recreations of the mission's events. For Sutter and Marshall, the day was fruitful. After the Blue Forces completed their bombing run and began their return to base, the Holloman F-15s descended from high cover. In the ensuing fast-paced battles, they engaged and claimed to have shot down several F-111s and F-4s. But the actual results become crystal clear as they watch the computer recreation of the day's action.
Okay, what I'm seeing here is I'm painting this 3-ship, and I lock up what I think is 20 of the F-111s here. And he's given me clearance to engage, so as a wingman now, what that means to me is I'm no longer tied to my responsibility to maintain visual on him. I'm cleared to go ahead and engage the threat that he's cleared me on there. And again, like I say, I think I've got contact on 20 here, as it turns out, and I round the corner, that's true. Round the corner, I shoot 20 with just a bore sight heat missile, and then I pull off and I shoot 19 with a bore sight heat missile. I really never see 21, and at this time, the comm is starting to bother me a little bit. I don't see him. I hear him talking about engaging, and so I come off. I think it'll show I'll come off to the right here initially.
That was good because you went for him very aggressively there, and when I got contact on the trailers, you came off good. Yeah. And like you said, we're looking real good. We're right together, but then well, Bambi makes a bad call. Hey, your leader's heading west.
Basically, one of the other elements of F-15s, the flight lead gave me a call. There was an F-15 in the flats heading west, and I took that to mean that was him. I saw that aircraft and started to go for him. Luckily, somebody still had a visual on me, called me back to North Worthington, which basically was a 180 turn for me. I heard him engaging F-4s out there, and at that point, I had a good idea what was going on. I got a radar contact on him, and we had mutual support via my contact with him at that point.
Okay. I'm attacking the F-111s now. They popped over the tip of Quinn Peak there, and so they highlighted themselves pretty well above the mountains. Now you're coming back. We're back together, and right here is where I say, okay, I'm passing right underneath your nose. Check right. You still don't see me, and coming up here is where Bambi.
And this is a good illustration of the picture I see. I look off the left of my cockpit. I see 2 eagles, and I hear somebody telling me, "Hey, there's eagles out in the flat." Evidently, I only see one, and I'm thinking, great, there's my flight lead. And in fact, you can see her right back here. But the call you make shortly thereafter gives me the clue, and I know what's going on.
Well, right here I say, I'm looking back between the tails at you going with Bambi, and I say, snap 180 left and head for the north end of Worthington. Again, 27 and 28 there. If we look at the vertical depiction, they're well above the clouds.
Right.
They're not a factor at all. Biggest lesson learned in the whole world, you know, they say 20/20 vision in the hindsight. Here's our hindsight on a graphic display in front of us. And so this is probably the best debriefing tool you could ever have, especially when you've got 80 airplanes running around out there.
The debrief is, I would say you almost get more learning in the debrief than you get in the flight. Because when you go on the flight, if it works great, fine. Even if it doesn't work great, you might not know it. You might not see the guy that has shot you down. So, for instance, after the red flag, we will get together as a group, our own red forces, and go through what happened so we all know what happened. Then we will get together in the package debriefs where the players for each mini portion of the war debrief what they saw and do some hand waving. And then we will play the RFMDS, see what happened, and do a bunch more hand waving. And what did you see? Why not? What could have happened differently? And then, of course, we'll have the full debrief with the whole package, all the blue, all the red, and get up and talk about the lessons.
For the combat pilot in modern air war, the key to survival is a total awareness of all that's going on around him.
It's unbelievable when you're ingressing towards a target, and just at the worst time of the mission is when the F-15 rolls in on you, or you get a SAM launch on you, and while you're evading the 15 or you're countering the SAM launch, at the same time you have to be thinking, am I going to make it to my target on time? Can I head towards the mountains to decrease the threats, or should I stay in the lowlands and proceed right to the target to make my TOT block? Because that's what it's all about, getting the bombs on target on time. So you really have to be thinking well ahead of the jet.
By the time they go through a training program, their own, and with our aid, and with Red Flag, we see that they take more of the overall air battle, so they're aware of aircraft that are 5 to 6 miles outside of the battle that will become a threat in 33 seconds, and they have 30 seconds to achieve a kill and then separate before those other hostile bandits enter the fight. When we go to fly against new pilots that are new to the weapon system, we can see right away during the first week on even simple scenarios where they're making a lot of mistakes. They make a mistake and they're going to die. Of course, it's on videotape and it's not the real war. As the week goes on, we may be stalemated to a more neutral, we take our lumps and they take ours. By the end of the second week, we're losing. And when we're losing, that's the whole point of our mission. That makes us feel good because the Blue Forces, the American Air Forces, are winning.
The experienced players, like Captain Sutter, still grow from their red flag training.
The first time I came here, I was a fairly junior guy, brand new wingman, and they put me on the wing of a more experienced major who had F4 and F5 and F15 time. And so I think my first red flag was really the best learning experience of my life because brand new right out of the chute, got the chance to participate in a large exercise like this. And yeah, I learned a lot, an awful lot.
The F-15's a machine where the pilot and just working the weapon system on it and getting to do it that fast pace, just one target after another come off, another contact 10 miles, trying to engage it and be effective in targeting that person coming off and targeting the next entity. I think from that standpoint that red flag really served that purpose well.
The tank has really grown through this exercise. Day one of the war, doesn't really know what to expect from a red flag exercise. First day out there, his primary job and the thing he's really concerned with is just trying to stay with me through the whole thing. As days went by, now he gets more comfortable with what's happening in the area. He starts to expand where he's looking, what he's doing with his radar. He's going to come out of this now and he'll come back to red flag again someday, and he'll be the old head and he'll be teaching the new young guys what to do.
The old heads and the young guys, passing on the fine art of high-speed survival and aerial combat. If these pilots are lucky, if all of us are lucky, red flag is as close to the real thing as they will ever come. But luck has run out before, for nations as well as for individuals. If you would have peace, prepare for war, goes the old saying. Or as the red flag motto puts it, we train like we plan to fight.